Welcome to the December 4th, 2015 edition of Colorado Inside Out Postgame, a special web-exclusive production here on Channel 12. Let's get a quick take on the Denver City Council rejecting a preservation bid on a West Highland house on Monday. The contentious 8-4 vote is the second of its kind in 2 weeks and has upset some members of the local community due to concerns of, quote, out-of-scale development and eliminating historical landmarks. Patricia Calhoun from Westward, you know Highlands very well. You know this argument very well. We had a big city council election earlier this year. Maybe some people were paying attention, maybe not. But now we're seeing some of it really come down to the decisions that now people are paying attention to. Were you surprised by the result of this vote?
I was actually surprised because it was the right decision. We have to remember these weren't historical buildings. They didn't have designation. They were just buildings that maybe if you looked at them could have been designated historic. I live in a designated historic building, and I have to say there are stringent rules about it. What you do, they can't be knocked down if they've been designated by Denver, unless they did one block in my house where they one house on my block, which they reversed. But in this case, I think they made the right decisions. It wasn't the landowners, it wasn't the property owners who wanted to designate them as historic. It was neighbors who were upset because they didn't want the construction that is going to be put on those lots that is allowed under our zoning. So if we've got concerns about zoning, we should go fight our zoning. If we've got some concerns that certain buildings should be historic, we should go try to get them on the register now. We shouldn't be fighting when a property owner wants to do what's legal.
David Copel from the Impens Institute and DU Law School. Do you think this will spur, I mean, we have some folks that at least campaigned as, I don't want to say anti-development, but there was a lot of that kind of rhetoric during the election. Do you think this kind of reform is on its way or more of the same?
Well, I think Patty was exactly right that whatever people think about zoning issues, the proper way to do that is to have the city council vote on zoning issues, and that historic preservation, which is a good idea conceptually, is so often abused with involuntary designations for buildings that are not historic, except, in the sense that, well, it used to be, that's the kind of thing that got built around this area as sort of like very normal housing. We're not talking about the Molly Brown house or something with intrinsic value. And I think that's a real abuse. It happens all the time in Boulder. Again, just as a pretext by the Gladys Kravitz neighborhood crowd to oppress other people illegitimately.
Eric Sondermann, political analyst. I agree with what Patty and David had said, but I also understand what folks are going through in some of these neighborhoods. I used to live in Highlands. My grandparents lived in Highlands. I'm familiar with the area, and I know what it feels like to walk down a block you've known for years and a bungalow that maybe Molly Brown or anyone other famous never lived in, but that suddenly is now a square structure that looks like it does not belong anywhere near the neighborhood, that goes all the way to the sidewalks. That still seems like a problem, but this doesn't seem like the right way to solve it. Do you think there's going to be more impetus to try to solve that problem?
Well, maybe so, but it ought to be solved through the right channels. I mean, I'd love to have a different take here just to mix it up, but I don't have a different take here to what both Patty and David had to say. I'm in agreement. David used the word pretext for a lot of these historic applications. I would use the word ruse. I mean, this is not about the historic property. It is, which are very average, typical properties. I think Patty references that she lives in what is actually a historically designated building. I assume that's because Patty lives there.
Absolutely.
It's the Molly Brown house. It's the Patty Calhoun house. But be that as it may, if we want to have these discussions, great, let's have these discussions. But let's do it through a zoning process or through a master planning process or what have you, not by random, hostile, historic designation applications. That seems to me to be completely out of proportion, and I'm glad the council voted as it did. I was sad to see 4 members of council buy into this notion.
Multimedia journalist Lisa Kennedy joins us the first on the table. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
So, I mean, the Highlands is not Denver's only neighborhood full of houses that are older and then suddenly turn into something completely different. Do you think there will be other motivation to get some zoning rules changed, or the council acted appropriately and not much more changes coming our way?
I think that the council, I mean, I think that all of us seem to be somewhat in agreement, which is I think that council acted appropriately. This is my neighborhood. I get it. But I think that strategically, you have to like do big picture stuff sometimes. And the big picture stuff is, is not necessarily emotional and requires a lot more work, which is to like have a vision for the city, especially in this sort of booming moment that I think sort of balances as many, sort of needs as possible in terms of what we think of as like representing Denver and like what is like historic and what gets lost. I mean, your studios are in a neighborhood that is, I said once, and I think it was sort of not appropriate in some way because it didn't recognize people's, lives on the ground, which is to say, I was sort of appreciative of the recession putting the taps on development and 5 Points because I think it did. And now that it's gone, things are really booming again. And you look here and there, and I love that the neighborhood the West Highlands neighborhood went from R2 to R1 because I do think that it is precisely the kind of thing. And that is a little bit more about strategy and saying we really do want to preserve this, as opposed to like sort of pitting neighbor against neighbor and property owner against other property owners. It's like it gets so riven so quickly in a way, and I understand the sort of exhaustion, and like you sort of come up from downtown into the Highlands, you are going to be like, can't we stop even one thing? But the notion that the one thing is like someone's property, and it is a little bit like a cheat to sort of say this is I love the idea that if it's historic, it was historic before the battle, so make that your effort. I think that that's really appropriate, but I get the emotional part of it. And Rafael Espinosa he won by a very interesting landslide. It was a rebuke to some degree of the sense of what was going on in the Highlands, and so I expect better. I expect better of the council members to like really not just pick their battles, but teach their constituency how to pick a battle. If that's your battle, then like start doing the work. That's like start doing it across the city. Honestly, it's like, oh, this is something that different communities feel. Are there other ways to build alliances that really do sort of say, well, we don't want everything to be a box? Because if you look at it, you're like going, I guess it can't fall down in the next 50 years when I'm like going curses. Why is that so ugly?
Right. Yeah. That is all the time we have for Colorado Inside Postgame this week. Leave us a comment. Tell us what you think. For everyone here at CPT12.org, I'm Dominic Dezzutti. Thanks for watching.